Hey guys, I just wanted to let you know that this week's episode is an epic. We talked about so much that I couldn't fit it all into one normal size episode. And this episode is already over an hour and 20 minutes. So if you love this episode, be sure to check out my Patreon, where you'll find the almost 2 hour extended version of this episode. For only $3 a month, you can support this show directly and get exclusive blogs, movie reviews, extended episodes, and behind the scenes updates from yours truly. So sign up if you haven't already. And for patrons, just want to let you guys know that the extended episode will be uploaded in the next 2 day, 1 or 2 days, depending on when you're listening to this. Now, it's time to explore the darkness and horrors of Middle Earth.
Death has come to your little town, Sheriff.
Have you ever felt a knife cut through human flesh and scrape the bone beneath?
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Be my victim.
You are all my children now.
Hello, my name is Austin Torres, and welcome to the Would You Die podcast, the show where we talk about our favorite horror monsters and villains. Today, I am joined by two of the most talented and prolific people in Michigan. They do everything. It's easier to say what they don't do. These guys honestly accomplish so much, but if I'm just going to look at their horror projects, I think they're best known for their upcoming film House of Ka, which has some friends of mine in it. The horror podcast, The Call of the Void, which has some friends of mine in that as well. And the upcoming horror podcast, Silvertongues, which also has some friends of mine. Please welcome my guests and my friends, Michael and Josie Herman.
Hello.
It is so good to be here, Austin. Thank you so much for having us on.
Thank you so much, Austin. This is great.
Yeah, we can't wait to talk all things horror, to talk Michigan, to talk, just how horror exists like in the present day and how art is moving and shaking. It's gonna be great.
I am so excited, especially because you guys have brought me a topic I don't get to talk about at all on this show. And on this show, we stick with horror for sure, but I like to change it up a little bit. I've done my fair share of Godzilla and Kong episodes, but they're monsters, so that's easy. I've done a Star Wars and horror episode. I've done Indiana Jones and horror, but today we're finally talking about the Lord of the Rings on this show. I couldn't be more excited.
That's right. And
and
Josie,
we are so excited.
Josie especially is like a Lord of the Rings aficionado. Like you're talking to somebody whose like life was changed.
I would, give Stephen Colbert a run for his money on my Lord of the Rings trivia. Just saying.
Right. If you got these two in the ring, it would be a slam down. Just so you know, Stephen, she's coming for you.
I'm coming for you, Stephen.
I mean, I know Stephen Colbert listens to this podcast, so keep an eye out for your emails, because he'll take you up, I'm sure. But before we dive into Middle Earth, let's give my horror audience a little bit of what they came for before we give them something a bit too different. What are your guys' relationship with horror, especially considering you have quite a few horror projects under your belt?
Yeah.
Oh, thanks. You want to start?
Thanks. Well, I think so. Call of the Void is a Lovecraftian horror. That's definitely the brand that is this horror of the unknown. And we were very inspired by Lovecraft when we started that project. And anything you want?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that like as far as like where horror comes from in like our past, I believe it was like all the way back in my undergrad. I think Amanda Buckhalter talked about that on the show
Dead
too.
Gallery.
But Dead Gallery was this first time that I experienced like true horror, and it's actually theater horror, right? So it's the goal of a theater show being to scare the audience, which is something that you don't normally do in theater, right? But it's so visceral because it's right there. I mean, it's like in your face kind of horror. I had a chance to direct some of these shows for Dead Gallery at EMU, and honestly, it was so scrappy, thrown together. I was kind of brought into it as like a writer initially to write some of this stuff. And I just found that I loved it. It kind of stretched this whole different side of my imagination to play with.
Michael sort of became like known as the horror kid at Eastern Michigan, where we went to school. And I don't think you really were that beforehand, but
No.
all of a sudden, everyone was going to Michael to talk about horror.
Sure. It's so funny because you're right. My family does not love horror. So usually when we do like a horror project or something, they're like, is it horror again?
Is it
And
scary?
we're like, yes, it is.
Sorry.
It's gonna be scary again. But no, but they love it too. They love that too. But it's just such a fun genre because it, once again, it challenges the mind in so many different ways. There's psychological horror, there's Lovecraftian horror, like Josie was talking about, and that was with Call of the Void. We really tried to like dip into that specifically and to say, how can we look at Lovecraftian horror from sort of like a newer lens or like a modern lens, you know?
Yeah.
And that's where this idea of the void, of this like blankness sort of invading you and affecting you kind of came from. So yeah, it was sort of a thought idea first that brought us into this.
I think another thing that we sort of do a lot of in our particular brand of horror, I think blockbuster horror is kind of like this too. There's typically sort of a moral to it. It's not just a slasher. It's not just like, let's just scare you for the sake of scaring you.
There's a truth there.
There's a truth there. There's some kind of message there. That very often our stories end with hope rather than just horror. We like to give the audience hell, but then bring them back out of that. So that's why I'm also excited to talk about Lord of the Rings a little bit, because I feel like Lord of the Rings is a little like that as well.
I think you could argue Frodo and Sam like going into Mordor, that's going to hell and back.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes.
So true.
In many ways, right? Like physically, but also like mentally.
Yes. Like they go on this mental and physical and psychological journey just as they're doing this physically.
Because we were actually talking about this earlier today, but like with the power of the ring, they're like made into like a wraith, right? You're like hollowed out. And like your humanity is stripped away from you. I mean, like how scary is that to like literally feel your energy and your like life force out of you? Like, oh, that's a scary thought, you know?
To kind of bounce on your point about like blockbuster horror and how a lot of it has like strong themes or messages, it reminds me of the work of Mike Flanagan.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's I'm glad you brought him up, because that's, I would say, House of Ka is very much inspired by
inspired by Mike
Flanagan.
Yeah. We love his work. We love how visual his metaphors are, you know, how complex his stories can be, but still understandable. It's like we throw this term around a lot, but accessible excellence is something that we feel like Mike Flanagan does very well. It's excellent, but it's accessible, and that's something we strive towards art.
Yeah. He also juxtaposes beauty and horror, I think, so well in his films. His films are so beautiful and cinematic and stuff, but then also so horrific.
Dude, every death scene in House of Usher is like so pretty. It's so aesthetically pretty, and then so like boom.
So like,
horrifying.
Terrible.
I love House of Usher. I love that show so much. I think it's my favorite of his shows.
I was going to ask you, what is your favorite? Do you have a favorite Mike Flanagan?
So I'm going to separate it between shows and films.
Sure.
Overall, I don't know if I could pick. That's not true. I could pick. But my favorite show is House of Usher, though I really want to say how close Midnight Mass is to it.
Yeah.
Great show.
It was really good.
I grew up Catholic, so it hits home, you know, and it should.
Yeah, I think like so I also Catholic over here, and I feel like for Catholics, like there's so many little nuanced things that I really appreciated, like, because I even noticed like you know, I'm one of the only people that noticed this before they brought it up in the show, but like I noticed that he was not wearing the right color vestments when he did the mass at I'm sorry, what's his name? The priest in it.
The actor's name.
But you know, there's that scene where he comes in and I'm like, excuse me, those are Easter robes. What is he doing wearing that? But then they brought it up and I was like, I just feel seen.
And like I devour interviews that man does. Like, I want to learn so much. He grew up Catholic too, and it shows because there's so much care. And I'm like, I forgot a lot of this stuff. And then that show brought me back these memories. It's funny because they announced somewhat recently that he's going to be doing the next Exorcist film.
Yes.
Is he really?
Yeah, I saw that.
And I'm like, that movie's going to be a lot. He don't pull his punches. That will be an emotional roller coaster, because that original Exorcist film, I think it does what Mike Flanagan loves to do and what you guys like to do, take you through hell, but bring you back with a little bit of hope. And that
Yeah.
original Exorcist gets so scary and it really sends its characters to hell, but I don't think it ever becomes nihilistic.
Yeah.
Sure.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
Yeah. Because you know what we found as artists is sometimes we really want to be nihilistic or we want to be like
Yeah.
sad.
Mhm.
We do as the artists, but
Right.
the
But the
audience
audience,
doesn't always want to like eat
Yeah.
a whole meal of that, right?
yeah.
There can be moments,
yeah.
certainly, but just devouring like
Mhm.
sour flavor, you can only have so much of it as an audience before you're like, wow, okay, this guy's going through something, you know?
Mhm.
Exactly.
And so
Yeah.
it's, yeah, you do have to have kind of the solution to the other side to like kind of balance things and, you
Yeah.
know, feel both, you know, to hold two things at once is always more interesting than just to hold one.
That's a really good way of saying it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. To answer your question real quickly, I do have a favorite Mike Flanagan thing. It is a film and it is Doctor Sleep.
Oh, Dr. Sleep's excellent.
Yeah.
Great choice. Yes, you know, that's an excellent film. Visually, that's an excellent film. Again, the acting of that is
The acting
insane.
is phenomenal
Yeah,
of that film.
Yeah. Rosie the Hat is a
Oh,
horrifying
I
person.
hate her, but in the best of ways.
Yeah,
Like,
right.
That is
So
my
good.
problematic wife.
What a good way to say that. Yeah.
I also I don't know if
Oh,
you
is that her
guys can
right
see. Yep.
There she is,
Amazing.
lording over your room as she should. Yeah.
my
that's
friend Adam Michaels, you can find him on Instagram at Adam's Art Box. I always like to plug my friends when I'm able. He made that work and
beautiful.
Oh, no way.
and he is so talented. He does a lot of horror conventions.
Yeah.
Cool.
So, and he'll do Motor City Comic Con too. So if you guys are Michigan area, if you guys go to Motor City Comic Con, you can get some epic artwork. I love plugging my friends.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, wait. Yeah. Way to stand up for your friends. That's so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you guys have like memories of horror films or horror books or TV shows when you guys were kids?
Yeah, you know what? I will have to say, not a straight horror film, but definitely something that has a lot of horror in it. And I know you love this one, so I'm excited to bring it up. But Jurassic Park was when we were 10 years old. So when we were 10 years old, that was like the film that we could see for the first time that was like scary in my family. It was sort of like a weird tradition. Whenever we turned 10, we watched Jurassic Park because it was like scary, but then we could like handle it by that age. And so I have a very near and dear love, which I know that you do too, Austin,
Yep.
for Jurassic Park in my heart, because it's one of those films where you're seeing suspense executed in a flawless way. You're seeing like horror elements dripping into this, what was normally like a very like wonder fest of a film,
yeah.
suddenly becomes this like nightmare box of a horror, and you're just like, whoa. And to feel that gear shift was something that like absolutely
That's blockbuster. Speaking of blockbuster horror, that's blockbuster horror at its finest.
at its best. Yeah, for sure. So that's really grand. And then I also do have to say, as far as like formative, like growing up, like horror-y things, I did have a chance to work on the backlot of Universal at Halloween Horror Nights for a year, and being able to scare, and actually to be like on the backlot, like working in those properties, you know, I was part of the American Horror Story maze. I was like brushing shoulders with like Exorcist people, and of course Michael Myers, and seeing Michael Myers, like seeing the many Michael Myerses like in that environment is so incredible. I mean, you like see them become that monster and then like come out of it and become friends with those people.
Fun they are.
Oh, yeah.
It becomes, it's horror, but it's everyone's having so much fun.
Yeah.
Just being spooky.
Right, because so often haunted house people are often like theater majors, so they're all of like the fun and joy of a theater major behind the curtain, and as soon as they pop through that curtain, they are the monster. You know, they have completely stepped into that body. Yeah, it was really funny. They cast Michael Myers by height, right, at Universal, so you
That
had to
makes
be a
sense.
certain height, yeah, to look the part, and then you could don the mask, and it was very cool. Very cool to see. So that was awesome. And I feel like that brought me very close to some of like the classic horror characters, right? Those Universal monsters, especially, just like really intimately, like face to face, you know, with those people.
Yeah. I think for me, growing up, I think one of my earliest experiences with horror was like my mom, who is a very conservative woman, loves Stephen King still. And so even when
Hell
I was
yeah.
very young, my mom would be like, let's watch Stephen King's The Stand.
So
So
she,
like,
yeah, Josie watched The Stand when you were like, how old are you? You
I
were
don't
like
know, like 6, 7, too young to watch The Stand. And yeah, I kind of everyone in my family, but especially me and my mom, we love Stephen King. I feel like Stephen King does have a lot of a lot of really deep morals in his work. And
Yeah. There's a lot
yeah,
of warmth.
yes, there is. And it was funny. We watched it. Michael had not seen it. So we watched it somewhat recently.
Mhm.
And it was funny to look back at that again, because you go like, oh my gosh, like that's where they were so inspired for Stranger Things. And like so much kind of came from Stephen King that's like in the zeitgeist that we don't even really realize is inspired by him, you know.
Yeah,
So
for
so I
sure.
think Stephen King was one of my
Oh
first
yeah, yeah,
horror and things,
yeah.
inspirations.
Can we flip the question back to you, Austin? Like
Yeah.
childhood memories of horror, or like some of the first moments of that, like hit you?
Yeah. I feel like I had a gradual relationship with horror. Like if you were to ask me 10 years ago, I'd be like, I mean, I like horror. I don't think I'd be doing a podcast. But
And
it's
here
like
you are.
but it like happened so gradually. I didn't even notice I was a horror fan until I was like making it. And I'm like, wait, I love it. Like it's one
Yeah.
I love cinema. I've always have. And as I've grown in my love for cinema, I just think my appreciation for horror grew. And I
Mm.
realized for me, horror is where cinema kind of comes like closest to what I consider like pure cinema.
Mm.
Mhm. Yeah.
And what do you mean by
Which
that? By
yeah,
like pure cinema, because it's visceral, or like what makes it so like potent?
I think it's because horror allows itself, it's a genre to me that allows cinema to transcend logic a bit. And yes,
Oh.
fantasy does it, but people get mad at Star Wars when a spaceship flies into another spaceship at hyperspace.
And there's
Uh,
fire in space.
and there's
Yeah.
yeah, but yeah, and like an established force user uses the force to pull herself through, but she can't fly. And it's a so Star Wars can't get away with the more dreamlike atmosphere, you know. But like a character who like hears a noise outside in the back and goes outside in the back, you're like, that's dumb. I wouldn't do that. But yes, please continue to do it because I want to see Jason get you. Like, I just think the audience allows horror to get weird in a way that other genres don't get allowed. Like, A Nightmare on Elm Street, I think is the perfect example.
Of course.
Because it's literally about dreams and nightmares, it embraces like dreaming when you're awake. You're seeing someone else's dream, essentially.
Sure, sure.
I was a film studies major, can you tell? But
No, that's a beautiful way to say that, though.
yeah.
You're right. You are
Yeah.
literally seeing someone else's dream in a couple different ways. It's like they've poured so much energy into it, but also like it is their imagination. Yeah.
And it's also like hundreds of people's dreams because there's so much collaboration with it because the idea comes from the writer, but the vision comes from the director, but the
Mhm.
souls of the characters come from the actors. And the
So
soul of
true.
the
Yeah.
So
piece
true.
comes from the composer. The rhythm comes from the
Yeah.
editor, you know?
Yeah, film is like one of the most collaborative art forms because of that reason. It's just this beautiful city, this beautiful
Yeah.
village that's created by
Yeah.
all of these people, and then it's all having their different parts like that.
With horror, you can tint it all blue and people don't think twice about it. Whereas if you try to do that with the drama, they're like, why is everything so blue?
Yeah.
For childhood, for me, I saw Jurassic Park when I was 3.
Whoa.
So that
Nice.
kind of set me on that path. And then I would say it's funny that you bring up that your family had a tradition of watching Jurassic Park when you were 10 because my family, I've said this on the podcast before, so for frequent listeners, I'm sorry you're hearing the story again, but oh well. There's this thing in my family where we see Jaws when we're 5.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And it's all because when my mom was 5 years old, that's when Jaws came out in theaters. And the story is my grandpa wanted to go see Jaws, but apparently he didn't have anyone else to go with. So he took his 5-year-old daughter to go see Jaws in theaters.
Incredible.
And then he liked it so much that he went and took my grandma to go see it, and they still took my mom. So they made
Oh,
her go
wow.
see Jaws twice as a 5-year-old in theaters. I was spared the theater experience when I was 5, but that's when my mom showed me Jaws. If I ever have children, they will be seeing Jaws when they're 5.
They're 5 years old.
Yeah.
Time to watch Jaws.
Exactly. It's a right up, and you can see like it still has a special special place in my heart. If I told you my favorite filmmaker was Steven Spielberg, would you guys be surprised?
No, but in the best way. I mean, yeah, he's a genius.
Yeah.
The master strokes that he's done are incredible.
Yeah.
And then from there, it becomes kind of like a step by step, like Jurassic Park leads to Jaws, Jaws leads to the Universal monsters. Those monsters lead to Alien and Predator, which leads me to Scream, which leads me to Halloween and Nightmare on Elm Street, then the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, then Paranormal Activity, Insidious. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, yeah, I've seen both versions of The Hills Have Eyes. Yeah, I've seen Audition. That was the most random horror movie I could think of. This insane Japanese film from the 90s. If you guys haven't seen Audition, it's awesome. It's brutal. I'll put it that way. It's a very brutal watch.
Cool. Good to know. Good to know. We're not like we can take it. I mean, we've definitely seen our fair share of intense cinema, but it's always good to know that going in, to know a film's about to be real intense. Yeah.
Yeah, that's one I've only seen once, but I remember it vividly. I don't need to see it again at this point. But yeah, so just kind of like a gradual thing. And I do think there are like a lot of films that aren't quite horror, but they have those elements that those helped me get into horror. Off the top of my head, I'm thinking the Indiana Jones franchise, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man trilogy.
Oh, yes, of course.
And the Lord of the Rings.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Which, we were mentioned a little bit earlier, but that is a great example of a horror like techniques and tropes put into a fantasy,
right,
and to see them play out in that way is so delicious.
It's very fun to just think that. I think we briefly mentioned this before, maybe it was before we started rolling, but combining this story, this epic story from Tolkien, with this little ragtag New Zealander who basically just did indie horror films. Like, what a cool combination to create something like Lord of the Rings, because you get all of these little like indie horror techniques that Peter Jackson used, and you combine it with this gorgeous landscape with these incredible developed characters, these orcs, the Uruk-hai, the Nazgûl, the Shelob, and all of these things. And then you get, with Peter Jackson, you get jump scares. You get Bilbo all of a sudden going, bah!
Which is truly one of the most horrifying frames in like cinema, because it's just like so unexpected. Just this boom, creepy face out of nowhere.
I know, it was so unexpected in that moment. I think one of my favorite moments. The whole theater was like, ah!
Yeah, and it's loud.
It's loud and it's intense, And then not to mention, of course, the character of like Schmeagol and we were reading a book about this actually, which is so cool. He literally is halfway between a hobbit and a goblin. He's like a hobgoblin. He literally is that. He is a hobgoblin, and Tolkien loved words.
Tolkien.
He did that intentionally. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, he
is a hobgoblin of a creature. Like this combination, which is that's so horror, right? A hobgoblin is like such like a horror like standard. It's this like trope that's been explored in many different genres, or many different like films and franchises. So Yeah, it's just super cool to see these deep horror roots in this world.
Yeah, and well, and even speaking of Gollum a little bit more, I feel like he's very much based on, or at least inspired, I wouldn't say based, but a big inspiration for Gollum from Tolkien's perspective was, of course, Grendel from the Beowulf story, right? And
Oh, okay.
yeah. Yeah, so Grendel is this horrifying monster from the story of Beowulf, which Anglo-Saxon myth, right? Going back thousands and thousands of years. But then I feel like Tolkien put his own spin on what that meant to him in his era. And then of course, when we get to the movies, Peter Jackson, I think, was very much honoring Tolkien, but it means something a little different to us. I think for us in cinema, we were very interested. I think they were very interested in this idea of him being kind of bipolar, right? This, like, I think they were so
Yeah.
interested in him being this morality of like, he wants to be good, but he also wants to be bad, and this duality, this yin and yang, this good and darkness that could be something that everyone relates to in some way. I just love to see, like, kind of even in the different adaptations and stuff, or just like how the history of that, like how where Gollum was when, the inspiration of him, where Tolkien had him, and where a movie of today might see him.
Yeah.
I love that because I never made that connection with Grendel. I don't know Beowulf that
Pronunciation.
well. I think the Robert Zemeckis CGI film when that came
Yes.
out, and that's my extent of Beowulf knowledge. I don't remember that film at all. I'm like, Beowulf is
Yeah. Not very memorable.
it's a cool name.
Yeah.
But I always associated Gollum in my mind. I don't think there's any like evidence for it, but my mind always just made this connection with Jekyll and Hyde.
Like wanting to control, and then like the insanity of out of
That
control.
duality.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
perfect split.
And he doesn't like transform his body like, I mean, technically he does because he gets corrupted by the ring, but he doesn't switch from that like Jekyll and Hyde do. But I do think Gollum is like a different personality than Smeagol.
Absolutely. Yeah. I almost think, like, if we're looking at it at a purely like psychological lens, we might even say today that this creature has like multi-personality disorder. Like, that's kind of what we would put him in today. I think if we're making a Lord of the Rings film, I know Lord of the Rings is 20 years old now. So if we were making it today and we wanted to talk about like mental health and stuff like that, that would be a big part of that conversation, is like he's got different personalities, and
Sure.
how are those personalities fighting with each other?
Yeah, vying for the one body that he is. Yeah.
Yeah.
And now I'm thinking of Norman Bates from Psycho.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
that's exactly how he is. And maybe, I mean, I'm just speculating here. Maybe Peter Jackson took a little bit of inspiration because like Norman Bates is arguing with himself as the mother for a lot of that movie.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Also, spoiler alert for Psycho if anyone listening hasn't seen it.
Yeah.
Right, absolutely. Why do you think that is, guys? Do we think we can like pick this apart a little bit? Like, what do we think is like so attractive to? I mean, it's the story that's been told. We've said Norman Bates, Jekyll and
Or
Hyde.
about like duality.
This like duality inside of a creature. Like, what do we think like makes that so like attractive to, I guess, an audience, or to like a horror audience specifically?
I think it's because I think everyone can relate to that in some way. Everyone
Yeah.
feels like they have a good side and a dark side. And I think in some ways we're all sort of I think so depending on different personalities, I think some people like to play along the dark side a little bit more than other people want to fight. If they're more hopeful, they want to like fight for the light. But I think
Mhm.
everyone can relate to having both of those
Sure.
in themselves a little bit.
And I think I'm looking at it with a horror lens, I think there's something about horror where you're able to, I think artists can look at the duality within ourselves through metaphors that horror provides. I think it's a stretch to compare this to Gollum, but I'm thinking of the myth of the werewolf. where that's used constantly in horror cinema, like controlling the beast inside quite literally, and it's always like a tragic tale, like The Wolfman or American Werewolf in London. These main characters don't want to be wolfmen.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're in fact doing everything they can to resist that,
To be
right?
human.
And yet they still like succumb to the power, of the wolf, which is so interesting. You're right. And then it's so fun to play that out, right? To dramatically play that out, like you said, with the strangeness and with the dreamness of horror, and really go for that ride, because you get to wonder like not only like what if, but like what if to infinity, like where does the what if actually go?
Yeah. Take it to the extreme.
Which I think is so beautiful. I think you're saying that earlier, Austin, how you can really play into that, and even in like the color grade of something, you can really like stretch and move with that, which is, it's actually something that we did a lot in Void, in Call of the Void, because it's a show that is like all in the head, right? It's like theater of the mind, and so we were able to play with the strangeness and the weirdness, and it's similar to cinema, where like you could focus on a certain sound, as if directing the audience to that, like a horror film does. Like, oh, now we're focusing on a drip of water because that's what's feeling weird in the room, and we can stretch the details out.
Yeah, we always tried to make the sound design of Call of the Void be very metaphorical. Like, even though like we obviously didn't want to confuse the audience and put sounds in there that don't make any sense, but I remember there's some cosmic cacophonies of sounds, very big high action cosmic explosions and stuff like that, as we're putting together a scene like that is so supernatural and so cosmic. We put a lot of things like glass shattering, because like literally in this character's mind, it feels like the glass, she's in a glass house and it's just shattering down, and there's always these metaphors to something cosmic in work that we do.
Absolutely. I remember we did a lot of work with like boats too, like the creaking of like boats, like it's like this like deep creaking noises, because that's what it like feels like to be like in a moment where you're kind of like pinned and trapped, is that kind of feels like
trapped in this storm on a boat.
It kind of feels like that sound feels like the audience should feel, or the character feels.
I love that, and I love how you guys bring up sound. Sound is so important to horror.
So true. You're like you said, I think there's something so intimate about like good sound design for horror, and I think that what's so special about horror is that like even with just like a spooky track, like a scene, it can become such a different energy, right? Like you can film, what's that called? I think it's called the Klusklaff effect, where it's like if you just film like a neutral face, it can be a lot of different things depending on the previous context. Kuslav? Oh man, the film graduate in me, it should know that. But
it starts with the K and it's Russian.
Yes, I know.
That word.
I think it's Kuslav. I'm pretty sure.
I think you're right.
Anyways, like horror does that so well, right? Where you can be in a moment and be informed, especially like you said, by sound. It can just really, really dictate that moment.
I'm also just a sucker for pacing. I love pacing so much, and that's such a boring topic, but I just love like the difference between just a millisecond to me is like, that's it. That's the perfect beat for that jump scare to happen. It can't be a second longer or a second shorter.
Yeah.
Really though. No, like you're so right. So it's funny because I'm not even thinking of bringing it to Jurassic Park again.
Of course,
as all things do.
As all good things should. Yes.
People who listen to this show, they're like, "Yep, it's Austin's show. Jurassic Park. Every episode gets mentioned multiple times." But if we're talking about pacing, we have to talk about the raptors in the kitchen.
Oh yeah,
of course.
Yeah.
That might be, in my opinion at least, one of the best crafted suspense scenes. And it's in a movie that a lot of people argue isn't even horror.
Yeah.
So true.
It's so
suspenseful.
Perfectly timed.
It's a perfect example of we talk about this a lot in actually like our climaxes of stories, where it's like it isn't just one. it's like pushed as far as it can go. Because
Mm.
sometimes we think as creatives, like, oh, if we just work ourselves to one jump scare or like one big moment, that's going to be enough, and that's going to be scary. And we got there, yeah. But honestly, that doesn't quite feel satisfying enough as an audience.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. That scene does such a good job of like, oh, we're safe. No,
We're
we're
safe.
not.
No, we're
it's
not.
actually way worse now.
Yeah.
And it's so often reverses those expectations, which is what you need in a good climax. It needs to have as many beats as like any other sequence.
We learned the hard way, because I feel like our first Call of the Void season 1 wasn't as climatic as it could have been, and I think we just learned from that. So we have learned to treat the ending episode, or that whole ending sequence, like that is just as important as almost the entire show. Like it's like we have to build that out. Like how many beats are there? We've discovered that at least for us, like making something like Call of the Void, there needed to be a lot more than we thought initially that there was. Like it's like, okay, we need like 9 whole parts to this sequence. That's all part of that pacing. Is like the climax to Call the Void season 1 was just too short. It just ended too fast, and it was like, oh, okay, well, that's
it was enough. We thought it was good, but it just needed more. It needed to be played out dramatically as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of like with pacing, because it's something that I don't think you can be taught. I think you have to learn it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think so. You almost have to try and fail before you go, oh yeah, okay, that wasn't right.
Right. But you're right, you can learn it, but you can't be taught it. You can't just be told.
Yeah.
There's hope, because it's like, if you feel like, I mean, I feel like I'm still learning it, but like I feel like if you can get there, but it does take trial and error. Absolutely.
Yeah. It's not in any textbook, not in any like class.
It's almost like music, right? You can like feel it when it's working, and then when it's not working.
Exactly. Like you can feel when the musicians aren't on the same tempo.
Yeah.
So when you have all these like different elements as a filmmaker, and you can feel they're not coming together, it's like, what do I need to adjust the pacing of? Kind of, you know? So listeners, I just cut out a bunch of stuff because Josie, Michael, and I, we were talking inside baseball, so to speak, a little bit.
Lots of little secrets.
Secrets are safe
but
here.
Not secrets for long. Soon to be not secrets. So that's very exciting.
Exactly. You guys will know soon enough. Some very exciting things in the work. Can't know that quite yet. I'll bring us back to Lord of the Rings. Something I'm really interested in, and I think we were kind of dancing around this a little earlier, is Peter Jackson in this trilogy really embraces multiple types of horror.
That's so true. Yeah. I mean, he's coming from doing horror in his backyard with his little camcorder. And I feel like he kind of became this backyard master at all these things. I mean, even from puppetry, he's done like those puppetry, was it Meet the Feebles, I think, to Brain Dead, all of these different things that he did. And working with all these different people, like Richard Tyler is the guy who does all of the miniatures, and kind of the head of Weta Workshop, you know. So I feel like he had all of these resources to do all these, like you said, all these different types of horror. I mean, there's the mental horror of Gollum, and then there's just straight up the ring wraiths, the Nazgûl, who are just these terrifying.
And they're like, they're like these like slow brooding like horror figures.
That's so
kind of like Michael Myers.
Michael Myers, which is still then even more contrasted with like a Shelob, where that's
the monster.
Right. Shelob is literally just this
so
like unrelenting, like aggressive monster, as many legs as possible, just kind of energy. You know?
Yeah. You almost get like whatever you're scared of, there's a little bit of that in Lord of the Rings.
He'll get you one way or another.
Yeah, and like you said, like, I love what you were saying there, is that there's different types of horror and different types of monsters. Like I feel like the ring wraiths, like you said, are sort of they're almost like, I don't want to say intellectual, but they're very they've got like this kind of elegance to them, if you will, and that's so in contrast with like a Uruk-hai, who's just this brute force, like I'm a just chop your head off, like kind of just bully, or like I guess just like a jock, basically an evil jock. And like a ring wraith is almost like just an evil criminal master who's just kind of much more sinister, but in kind of like just like their spirit rather than like physically violent, I guess. You know?
And very mysterious too, right? Because like, I mean, the ring wraiths, they're so anonymous, and I'm reminded of that one shot where they you just see like their hands and like their swords like moving like in a line.
Oh,
it's so elegant, it's so like beautiful, but it's like their daggers, their
and
knives,
even their
you know?
their synchronicity is kind of horrific, like the way that they're so synchronized. There's something horrific about that. Just like, why are they so in sync with each other? I feel like that shouldn't happen.
Right, like that one scene, the one scene where they stab the pillows. You know what I'm talking about, guys?
They stab the pillow, of course.
Where they all raise their swords.
The classic.
And you think it's going to be the hobbits, right? You think it's the end.
My little innocent mind when I first saw that was like, I guess all the hobbits died. I like I couldn't think of any other like finish for that scene. It was just so well done in my head that I was like, man, I can't believe all of those hobbits just died. That's terrible. And then the next shot, of course, is them from the looking at it from the window and like, oh, you got me.
You got me.
You got me. I love that scene because like the way they're and for people listening, they're standing with the swords over their head. I was making the motion. I'm like, not everyone's watching.
Not everyone can see the
But and I didn't think about it growing up because I haven't seen this movie. But now when I see it, I'm like, it reminds me of the one kill from Black Christmas. If you guys have seen that.
I have not seen Black Christmas,
but yeah, you know exactly what I mean.
I do know what you're talking about. Yeah, that's so interesting.
Oh, yeah.
Well, and what a different context. It's just so interesting to like see those different tropes like used in like different ways. So cool.
So interesting.
And earlier in the movie where I think when Frodo and Sam and Merry and Pippin first see the ring race before they really know what there are, it kind of has, I think, some Spielberg shots in there. Like there's the dolly zoom on the forest, which Spielberg used very famously in Jaws.
Yep. It's that classic, where you're moving and zooming.
Yes, I know
so
it
makes the forest look really bizarre. Yeah. We've actually stood in that forest because we did go down to New Zealand.
We visited New Zealand, and that was such a beautiful.
There's a little plaque there where you can see where the very first shot of Lord. That was the very first shot of Lord.
That was the first shot that they filmed.
That was the first location. I don't know what their first shot was, but it was the first location, right?
Yeah. Right. Mm-hmm.
Well, my headcanon is it was that shot.
Yeah.
That's so incredible.
So to like stand in that forest was like really cool. To like know that there was such a great jump scare, such a great like horror suspense moment done there. It's just
and you know when the hobbits are against the log and the ring wraith kind of just like pounces over and the bugs are crawling. It's both like Indiana Jones when they're like but they can't really move. And they're crawling. And Jurassic Park, because to me, the ring wraith, when it just kind of pounces and it's looking, but it doesn't quite see it. That is the raptors in the kitchen.
Yeah, that's a really, really good comparison.
And Peter Jackson is such a student of horror, where it's like, we brought up Black Christmas, we brought up Jurassic Park. He takes inspiration from so many different horror.
Yes. Yeah.
Because like Shelob is very, very much like a creature feature kind of monster. Almost like those 50s like tarantula.
That's true. Yeah.
Arachnophobia and Eight-Legged Freaks kind of has those bigger spider, or like arachnophobia, not arachnophobia, anaconda, like plastic, the oversized creature feet, you know?
Yeah, there's something horrific about little things, but there's also something horrific about things that should be little but are really big.
Yes.
And relentless.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like the xenomorph in Alien. That's what Shelob really reminds me of.
Yeah. And I think what's another just variance in the type of horrific creatures that we see is in Lord of the Rings is sometimes we see these very, very fantastical things like the Balrog, who's just this
yes.
beast made of fire, you know. And but then comparison to that with Shelob, who is just a spider. I mean, a huge, huge spider, but it looks pretty much just like a type of spider that we would have these days, you know,
Yeah.
but just very
Yeah.
big. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. There's a little
Yeah, we haven't
something
even
there.
talked about the Balrog yet, but the Balrog's one of those like ancient horrors, right? Like an
Yes, kind of a
ancient,
Yes.
Lovecraftian horror if you
right,
think
of
about it.
this
Yeah.
ancient creature that you don't really understand what it's gonna do next, like why. I mean, you know, it's after
Yeah,
you, but
you
you don't
don't
really
know.
fully
Mhm.
understand just that it has immense power beyond you, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Kind of
That's
like
so true.
Pinhead and Hellraiser.
Sure, sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Although
I
I,
always
I think he's doing a little bit different things with his whip than Pinhead is.
Sure, sure. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, definitely like, and I love whenever something gets like strange like that with like Lovecraftian kind of like undertones to it and just sort of this
Yeah.
weird, yeah, sort of otherworldly. Oh, yeah, it's delicious to me.
Yeah. I think what another thing that we see a lot in the difference of all the creatures, all the horror creatures in Lord of the Rings is I do think because Tolkien had such a like morality to his work. I feel like a lot of
Yeah.
these horror creatures, there's like a specific, I guess, a specific like deadly sin almost that they're related to. Like I feel like the Balrog is like wrath, you know, it's just this fiery demon of wrath.
Yeah.
And comparing that to, like Gollum is kind of what do
Oh,
you
gotta be greed, right?
greed, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you know,
Greed,
and
yeah.
yes, and I kind of I haven't thought of that much about each one, but I feel like you could kind of do a study on that. Like what does Shelob represent and how is she different than the Balrog and Gollum and Sauron himself? I feel like is pride, right? Like maybe
Yeah.
greed too, certainly, but like Sauron himself is just like wants everything for himself. He wants to be in control, and that is almost like the king of all. They say pride is the king of all sins or whatever. So I feel like that is something that Tolkien put into his work, and I think that Peter Jackson did a great job of showing that in all of these visuals.
Yeah.
I think Shelob might be gluttony.
Oh, that's a good one.
Oh, of
Yes.
course.
Oh, of course.
Wow, what a great one,
Of
Austin.
course. Yes. That's what a great, yeah, of course, because
And feeding on these
constantly feeding on
these like
yeah.
on these vessels that she's stored up. And
Yeah.
So cool. So cool. Yeah. And we gotta make this an essay, guys. Like the
We
7
do.
deadly sins
we
in
could
Lord
have
of the Rings.
a visual like a YouTube visual essay, like talk about all this,
Yeah.
all these different aspects here.
Yeah.
Well, this might be a stretch, but I'm interested of what you guys think. What if Gollum is lust?
Oh,
that's very
yeah.
interesting.
Because he is like so, yeah, I mean,
He calls it his precious.
calls it his precious. It's very
Yeah.
There's a lot of like
Yeah.
stroking
Yeah,
and like
yeah.
like holding that like happens with
Right, yeah.
Gollum, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good one.
Because
Yeah.
from there, I think you could argue that Sauron is greed, and maybe the Witch King and the Nazgûl are pride.
Yeah.
Oh,
uh-huh.
sure.
Because
Oh,
pride
of
was
course.
their downfall.
Pride was their downfall
That's
because
true.
they claimed the
Mhm.
rings and they thought that
Yeah.
they could,
Right.
like
Yeah.
how it happens in real time in Lord of the Rings. They're like, we could just take the ring and use it ourselves,
Boom.
you know.
Yeah.
But we see that has already doomed those men, yeah, and how they sort of fall. And
Yeah.
those are cool. That's really cool. Yeah,
That's awesome.
I'm taking us into the Hobbit a little bit.
sure.
Mhm.
Maybe Smog is sloth.
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Sure. I mean,
'Cause he-
like, yeah, because he is very much like, another easy one would be greed because he's like hoarding
Right.
the treasure. But
A lot
I
of them
like
could be
sloth.
greed.
Yeah, a lot of them could be. Yeah, I feel like greed is a very, very prevalent theme in Lord of the Rings. But I do like sloth for the dragon too, for Smog, because yeah, it's kind of like this is mine, but I don't want to work for it at all. I don't want to. I just kind of lay here all day and not do anything. So yeah, that's a very, very good one, very interesting one.
And he also has
Mhm.
elements of wrath. Like you took
Yeah. Sure.
my gem of countless gems that I have. I'm gonna destroy Lake Town.
Sure.
Right.
You're like, one of these things is not quite equal here. Yeah,
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I do admit I don't know The Hobbit as well as
Yeah.
The Lord of the Rings. So Smog's the
Oh.
only thing. I mean I love dragons, so that's gonna be the thing I remember from those
And
movies.
Smog is like the probably one of the most classic best dragons I think there are.
Yeah,
like
very
in
classic dragon.
very classic dragon, right? Like literally hoarding gold in the mountain, breathes fire, does all the beautiful things that you want the dragon to do.
Right.
So I think we have one more sin left.
Yeah, which one are we missing? I forgot.
Envy?
We're
We can
missing
have-
Oh, envy.
envy.
Envy. Yes. Okay.
Could be a stretch, but Saruman?
Ooh,
Oh, I don't think it's a stretch at all. I think
Yeah.
it's like right on the nose.
that's a great
because
one.
I think that
yeah.
and here's I do have to say this too. I do know that one of the deep metaphors behind Saruman is actually industrialism, which sounds super boring and
Yes.
academic, but give me a second here, guys.
No, that's not
Because
boring at all.
What happens is he literally is like invading. He's saying like progress is the way, industrialism
Yeah.
is the way. We must like mechanize everything, and we like
Yeah.
see him do that through the show, and you like literally see him as this like institution of like what attacked Tolkien's like life, literally, and like attacked the countryside was industrialism, and
Yeah.
and that's why the book ends the way that it does with like
the
Saruman
scoring
the
of
scoring of the Shire, which nobody wants to talk about because it's just a weird moment in the books.
It's a weird moment for everybody.
Yeah, it's a weird moment for everybody.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is like this like invasion, and I think it's like it's this craving, right? I think
Yeah.
that especially in the movies we see Saruman craving power,
Sure.
like, and it's weird because he is the White Wizard, but he just wants more. You know, he's envious of that ultimate power.
And I think he's even I feel like envious of Gandalf, because I feel like
Yeah.
he's like Gandalf, who is lesser than him, and as far as power and stuff goes, I think Gandalf is kind of elevated to like in some ways. I mean, he becomes the White Wizard, right? He kind of like I don't want to say overthrows Sauron, but Gandalf definitely gets higher than Saruman. So I think even before that though, I feel like Saruman has this sort of like, I don't know, even maybe Gandalf is good and he's just like not as good. So he's just like, well, you like goody two shoes wizard over there.
Yeah.
And you do see it like very aesthetically. It's sort of funny. The first time that I watched Lord of the Rings, when you see Saruman, you're like, well, he's got to be a bad guy, right?
Yeah.
Because he looks so creepy. You know?
I remember not even
those
like
nails.
it wasn't even a question. I was almost like, why is Gandalf hanging out with an evil man? Like,
right? Because
because he's obviously evil.
Yeah.
And got those fingernails.
So we got to talk about this. Saruman, horror fans, you already know, played by Christopher Lee.
Yeah.
Just one of the most awesome people who ever lived.
Incredible.
Like, MI6, legendary actor.
Yes.
Known for playing Dracula, playing Count Dooku, playing Saruman, like iconic roles. He was in Gremlins too.
And then and then in his life, witness
the last
guillotine.
Yeah.
And also the inspiration low key for James Bond.
Yeah.
His previous lifestyle. Crazy. What an incredible man.
I'm sure that man has murdered people. I know it in my heart. I don't know why.
Definitely. And when he was like in the last decade of his life, he led a metal band.
Yeah.
Right, which is incredible. Yes, if you guys haven't heard his music, it is so good.
Doesn't he have a Christmas album? Like a
Christmas album? Yep.
Yeah,
he has this.
Wow. I believe he has a hard metal Christmas album.
Oh man.
Yes. And he has this, I don't know if it's on the Christmas album, but he has this amazing cover of My Way, but it's like a metal version.
Incredible.
Christopher Lee, what an icon.
He won life.
He did win life. And I heard on the set, listeners, you may already know this, but on the set, he was very much like the one who knew Tolkien very well.
Yes.
Like, and knew
so much. Well, because he was the only cast member who had met J.R.R. Tolkien.
Right.
In real life.
I was about to say, didn't he know him?
Yes.
Yeah, he did. So he was like the guy who like knew the lore and he like knew the world.
Yeah. So they could not tell Christopher Lee anything because he would be like, nope. Technically, it was this way.
It should be this way.
Exactly. Rest in peace, Christopher Lee, but I love him. If we're doing Lord of the Rings and horror, we have to talk about him because like that man had a legendary run as Dracula.
Absolutely.
And he played in so many horror films with Peter Cushing. So when I did my Star Wars and horror episode, we definitely talked at length about Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing for being horror icons who were cast in Star Wars. I have to say, Peter Jackson knew what he was doing casting Christopher Lee. right guy for the role. But there's that meta, maybe not us when we were kids watching Lord of the Rings, but for adults who grew up with those Hammer horror films,
Yeah,
like,
yeah, I never thought about that. Yeah, because I mean, I was too young when I first watched Lord of the Rings. I didn't
yeah,
know who Christopher Lee was, but now I just kind of appreciate that so much.
Yeah. It is really interesting to like, because like all of the characters, all of the cast are all superstars now, but at the
Yeah.
time
yeah,
making Lord of the Rings, only
Like,
certain
there's only
ones,
certain ones that were
they were
superstars. Yeah,
superstars at the time. You know, like
Christopher Lee,
Sean Astin, you know,
Sean Astin, because he had done Rudy.
right? But then Christopher Lee, yeah,
Yeah.
he was like a name. He was already
yeah.
very established,
Mhm.
and for what he had done.
And Ian McKellen, but still,
of
even
course.
Ian McKellen was mostly a Shakespearean actor.
Known for his theater
I mean,
more.
Yeah.
definitely famous, but
Because like X-Men and Lord of the Rings came out around this first time, so I don't think Ian McKellen had that mainstream
mhm,
success. You know
sure.
who I'm gonna bring up if we're gonna talk horror icons in Lord of the Rings? I have to bring up Brad Dourif.
Oh, of
Oh,
course.
of
Yes.
course, got Chucky, right?
Yep,
Yeah,
yep,
yeah. Yeah,
and
I love him so much. Just
yeah,
he's
uh,
actually, the last time I watched Lord of the Rings, I think I was like, "Wow." Like, I was just shocked by how good his performance was. I mean, just Grima Wormtongue, what a just interesting guy. I mean, just his body language and just the
yeah.
way he is just so kind of beautifully done. I don't know, in the
In the
creepiest
creepiest way.
creepiest way. And just the fact that he shaved his eyebrows for the part. I mean, such just beautiful. What a beautiful, beautiful thing.
Well, the last time I watched Lord of the Rings, it was a few months ago. They were playing the Lord of the Rings trilogy at my local MJR. All my friends are huge Lord of the Rings. I love Lord of the Rings, don't get me wrong, but of my friends, I am the least Lord of the Rings
I
fan.
gotcha.
So I did not realize when I agreed to go see these movies that they were the extended versions.
Oh,
Aha.
of course. I mean, could you watch any other version?
Well, that's how my friends were. They were like, yeah, that we're getting our money's worth. It's gonna be so good. I'm like, homies, Return of the King is fucking 4 hours.
Oh, it's so long.
It's
It
very
is
long.
so long. Yeah, the
Yeah,
extended, but such beautiful things that they because actually in the
it was great. Yeah.
speaking of Christopher Lee,
Mhm.
that wasn't his death scene was not in the original theatrical version. That was in
Right.
the extended, that was added to the extended edition. And Christopher Lee, of course, was very upset with that they cut him from the theatrical version. He didn't
He didn't attend the premiere.
he boycotted the premiere because he
Yeah.
was so mad.
Talk about horror. Could you imagine Christopher Lee?
Could you imagine Christopher
Being
Lee being
mad at you.
angry at you?
Yeah,
If I
that's
was Peter Jackson, I'd be like, I'm dead.
You're
I
like,
am
lock
going to
the
be
door.
assassinated. Lock that door. Bolt the windows.
They ended up making amends though.
Yes,
They
yeah,
did.
I know. Yeah,
He did do that, and that makes me happy that they ended up uh right like they got on good terms, especially with Christopher Lee passing.
yeah,
Sure.
yeah.
So I'm glad it wasn't like a falling out that lasted forever.
Sure. Oh
But
yeah,
yeah, I would be
absolutely.
if I was Christopher Lee, I'd be pissed. But also I'm like, these movies are long as fuck. I get it
Yeah.
from Peter Jackson's side. I'm like, I get it, you know? Don't get me wrong, the extended versions are great, but in a theater, I'm
Oh,
like,
yeah, no, for sure. And for the record, I we talked about this before. I actually think that the Fellowship of the Ring theatrical edition is probably superior. I'm okay. I'm going to make a lot of Lord of the Rings fans mad here, but I actually do think the theatrical version of the Fellowship of the Ring is the most tight. It's very well done. I think the
yeah,
editing of that is very beautifully
It's
done.
very sharp.
It's very sharp. Yeah,
But
but
the extendeds are wonderful for this.
they're wonderful.
For the next
And I
two,
think
certainly, yeah.
certainly Two Towers and Return of the King, the stuff that
yeah.
they are able to put back in the extended editions really add to the
Incredible.
film so beautifully.
When we saw Return of the King, I got up at some point, right after we first see Shelob, and I go to my friend, I'm like, let me know if I miss Shelob again. Because I'm arachnophobic, so obviously Shelob is one of my favorite parts.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I'm not kidding. I go to the bathroom. I order some chicken tenders. I go grab a beer. I'm like gone from 15 minutes. And I come back and I go to my friend. I'm like, "Hey John, did I miss anything?" He's like, "Not really, no."
Not really, no. Probably just like the Ents walking around or something.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm like, because I'm like, let me know if I miss Shelob. Let me know if I miss the elephants, because I fucking love the elephants. They're just
Oh,
big
yes,
ass
yeah.
they're
elephants.
awesome. Yeah.
They're so
Yeah,
cool.
and those are sort of like, they're not necessarily, I wouldn't call them beasts of horror, you know, the horrific creatures, but they are, I mean, you watch them and they're kind of, they're scary. I
They're
mean,
mighty,
they're
yeah.
they're mighty. I mean, those things will kill you.
You know, I like where you're going. They're kaiju coded.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
They're like the closest thing we have to a Godzilla or a King
yeah.
Kong
Sure,
in
sure.
Lord of
In
the
that world.
Rings,
Yeah.
which, Peter Jackson ended up making his King Kong.
Yes, that's true.
Which is
Yeah.
crazy because it was filmed also in New Zealand.
Also in New
And it
Zealand.
really shows
Yeah,
the
the
diversity.
diversity of New Zealand. Yeah.
Because it can be both a jungle
Mhm.
and it can also be Middle Earth, which is crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What a crazy cool place New Zealand is.
And this might be my hot take. I think King Kong is Peter Jackson's best film.
Wow. Would you
Oh,
say that?
A strong word.
Whoa.
I
thrown
stand
into the
by
ring
it.
by
That
Austin.
is certainly, that is bold, my friend.
It is a good film. It is a
Yeah.
very good film
Yeah. Uh-huh.
with some wonderful performances.
I do love it.
Yeah.
It's really good. It's a really good one. Yeah.
I think maybe because I just have a stronger connection to monster movies than I
Sure.
do to true fan. And I love Lord of the Rings, don't get me wrong. Peter Jackson's version of King. Also, there's dinosaurs. Let's be real. That might be.
You're like, I'm in it for the dinosaurs.
Can I ask?
Yeah.
Josie, do you have a favorite creature? Do you have like
Oh.
a creature that I think I'm detecting dinosaurs and I'm detecting
Dinosaurs,
werewolves.
yeah.
From Austin here. Do you happen to have one?
I love creatures of all. I love creatures of all kinds.
Yeah.
If I had to pick one true favorite, it would be the Tyrannosaurus Rex in Jurassic Park,
Oh,
Yeah,
beautiful. Yeah.
followed closely by the Xenomorph from Alien.
it's a great choice.
Oh, that's
the Xenomorph
great.
is so scary.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I totally agree.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm going to say, going with the theme of Lord of the Rings, I think I am going to say, oh gosh, okay. And now I'm like split actually, because I love the ring wraiths. But I think I'm
They're-
most horrified of the Uruk-hai. I've had like several like nightmares about orcs like attacking
Mhm.
me. Like the Uruk-hai are just terrifying to me because you have no idea what they're gonna do next. They're just these massive, huge guys that are just gonna swing their things at you. So I think I'm most horrified of the Uruk-hai, but I think there's something, the ring wraiths just kind of fascinate me, I suppose. There's something.
Yeah.
It's just aesthetically, they're really cool. I love, and I would say I have a special liking for the ring wraiths in the Fellowship of the Ring on their horses, rather than their flying steeds. Which their flying steeds are great too, but just something about them on these black horses with their red eyes. It just it's terrifying. Like that scene first comes up, like we were talking about before. They come up, they ride up, and they're just like just creepy and so I guess powerful, but also like psychologically like horrifying. I feel like they're gonna haunt your dreams like for the next 12 years if you see one,
Yeah.
and they're soulless. Like they're just the fact
Yeah.
that they have no face and everything. It just and I can't help but feel like when they turn towards you like they do in the film, and there's that blackness. It's even more blackness than just like they're the shrouded. It's like that goes on for eternity.
Yeah.
Terrifying and yet fascinating concept to me, I suppose. The lack of soul, the lack of any kind of personhood, I think is something that I think is terrifying.
Oh, I love that.
What about you, Michael?
Oh, like my favorite like creature of a kind?
Yeah, or some kind of horror.
I do love a vampire.
A good good classic
but
vampire.
I'm gonna go for like a weird underdog. I think scarecrows are actually really terrifying.
Scarecrows.
Like the scarecrow creature is not very well it's kind of like the guy on the fringe who can be so horrifying if done right. I think there's a couple different scarecrows that are quite lovely, but I'm not just talking like a scarecrow in a field, guys. I'm not scared of just scarecrows in fields. I'm talking about like an animated like creature that is like they seem like old and like haunted in a way that's just very Midwestern, and I like that.
Yes, very
Okay.
Midwestern. Yeah, very Midwestern.
Very Midwestern.
That's interesting to think about, because like when you say scarecrow, I immediately think of the Wizard of Oz.
Of course.
Yes,
And
I
he's
do too.
that's a wonderful Scarecrow if he only had a brain, but
Yeah, but like
But contrasted with like the Arkham Horror Scarecrow,
yeah,
it's a very,
gotcha.
very different type of beast. You know,
sure,
and I
yeah.
think like Magic the Gathering has like a whole line of Scarecrow type horror creatures that are just like, oh, they're nightmare fuel. They're awesome.
Yeah, I
They're
know
so cool.
what you mean. And it's very,
Yeah.
I think Michael always loves the fall too. I love the
I
fall
do
too, but
love
like
fall,
it's such an autumnal
I
monster,
love
you know,
autumn.
the idea
Yeah.
of this horrifying, you know, pumpkin head rotting.
Yeah,
like-
so good.
You know who gives me Scarecrow vibes? He's not, but kinda is Sam from Trick or Treat. I think
Oh,
it's because of the
yeah.
burlap sack.
Of course.
Yes,
of
the
course.
burlap sap
I
or
think
sack. Yeah.
definitely, yeah. I think that I'm taking him. I'm putting him
Yeah.
in that
Yeah.
camp.
Yes. Okay. Wait, no, seriously. Anything else? We're talking about this, like the reasoning. Is there anything else like kind of almost metaphoric about the scarecrow that you could think? Is it like the fact that they don't have a brain?
I mean, it could be. I just like I like that, like the soullessness of them, but
Yeah.
also like the
They're
animation.
animated. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
There's like it's like they shouldn't be alive, but they
Yeah.
are.
You know what it
Yeah.
is? I think
And they're in
I'm
Cabin
getting-
in the Woods. Cabin in the
Right,
Woods.
yes,
Yeah.
they're in Cabin in the Woods.
Yeah.
Yes, I think some smarter poet than me said this, but they said that we are most horrified by things that are almost human, like things that are just
So that like uncanny valley.
yeah, things that
Yeah.
are just a little bit distorted are some of the most frightening to us, right? And at least to me, I think so. I think that
Yeah.
like things that are very humanoidal. That's why like the Slendermans are
Ooh, yes.
horrifying. and
Slenderman. Yep.
all those people that are
Slenderman.
like human, very close to, but like
Yeah.
slightly off.
Mhm.
And
Well,
I think that-
vampires.
yeah,
Vampires, yeah.
vampires as well. And I feel like that breed of
Yeah.
horror like really speaks to me. I think, yeah, a lot.
Yeah.
I think that's fascinating, and I love that answer so much. I'll answer this as well. Josie, you already answered this, but Michael, do you have a favorite villain or creature from Lord of the Rings?
Oh, from Lord of the Rings specifically, that is a wonderful question.
Oh, I think I know what you're
Do
going
you know what I'm
to
gonna say? What am I gonna say?
No, the Witch King.
Yeah, it's got to be the Witch King, guys. I mean, like, so when I was young, I had a little Game Boy game of the Lord of the Rings. I think it was Return of the King. I don't know, guys. It was one of them, and I played the Witch King like non-stop, and I would just destroy everybody, and it was like so much fun. I think that like the face, everything about the Witch King is just so
And his
immediately.
mace.
Yeah, the huge big mace. Everything is so immediately like horrifying and like classic villain. Such good presentation.
So ring wraith, but King of the Ring
Yeah,
Wraiths.
King of the Ring Wraiths.
Yeah.
I think the Ring Wraiths are great, but
Yeah.
yeah, the King of the Ring Wraiths is like horrifying. When I remember seeing that mask for the first time and just going like, whoa, like
Oh, you know, I thought of one more that I like that's not, you know, ring race wonderful, but there's
Yeah.
another, you know, shout out to one more villain that we haven't talked about yet from Lord of the Rings. Very small part, in fact, only in the extended edition, but the mouth of Sauron. Do you
Oh,
know you know what I'm
dude.
talking about? The mouth of Sauron. He's the guy that
Oh,
comes out. He just has this one glorious scene, but he comes out from the gates of Mordor and has this you know repartee with the
and
with
he
the
needs
remaining-
chapstick.
and yes, and I love that guy so much. Fun fact, he's the same actor that played one of the sharks in Finding Nemo.
amazing.
But yeah, which is just beautiful. I think he plays, is it Bruce, I think, in
Oh,
Finding Nemo?
Great.
Anyway,
Also, the Great White.
Yeah.
yes. So same actor. But I love that guy so much. There's something so wonderful about like just the design of that guy, the fact
Yeah.
that he's the mouth of Sauron. And literally that's all he is. He's just everything else is completely obliterated from his identity except for this mouth, you know. I love
Yeah.
the design of that because the way that they did that, I don't know if you're aware, if you noticed, but they actually digitally flipped the mouth. So his mouth is actually upside down. So
That's
when
cool.
he's talking, it's like that's why it just looks so weird. It's because his mouth is digitally flipped. So
Wow.
his front teeth are in the bottom. And just
I love
what
that.
what a creepy, weird, disgusting mouth with disgusting teeth. And I love it. I love it so much.
He's a great character. Yeah.
Yeah. And I
He's
just love
a-
his even
yeah.
his like weird little like perky little
Oh,
head
head
shifts are
Yeah.
so funny. He's so cocky and
Because he's
and-
sassy.
yes, he's sassy. That's such a great word. He's this sassy mouth of Sauron that's so unexpected. And I also love what happens to him. You know, it's just then
Yeah.
he just chopped off just like that. Love it.
Beautiful.
Just such a beautiful scene.
I love it. He always gave me Cenobite vibes.
Oh yeah.
Mhm.
That's great. Yeah.
I think that's the second Lord of the Ring creature I compared to Hellraiser. So, I gotta evaluate myself. Speaking of evaluating myself, I have to tell this story real quick. When my
Please.
friends and I saw Fellowship of the Ring in theaters, you remember when the one, I think the Uruk-hai leader, I don't remember his name, but he's like kicking ass, and I think it's when he's fighting
Boromir?
fighting
Aragorn.
Aragorn.
Yeah.
Aragorn.
He like licks the blood off of the sword,
Yeah.
and my first thought was, why did I think that was kind of hot? And I told my friends this, and I'm like, I'm very concerned
I'm very
about
concerned
myself
for my
at this
well-being.
moment.
But
Yeah.
somehow I just thought that was hot.
I
Yes,
mean, no
that
one
is
disagreed with me.
somehow we could all relate.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's Lurtz.
Yeah, so his name is Lurtz. That is
Okay.
one of the best Uruk-hai. Mwah, so beautiful. So
Yeah.
beautiful.
Great New Zealand actor, and he actually was recently in
Oh yeah, what was he
that
in?
other crime movie with what film is that? It was
He does a lot of, as you can tell, or as you could probably tell, he does a lot of stunt work.
it was that one the assassin movie, The Killer.
Oh, The Killer.
Oh,
There's
okay.
one absolutely grisly fight scene that's it was a lot of fight scenes in The Killer, but there's a fisticuff fight
Yes.
in The Killer, and he's
Yeah,
also
and
the
that's
actor
the guy
in
who
that.
plays Lurtz.
The textures of that fight, if you guys are going for sound design, let me tell you that
So it's grisly. It's just smashing people on glass.
yeah, you
and-
feel every
Oh.
twist and break
Yeah,
in that.
yeah.
Yeah, talk about horror sound.
Sure.
I've never felt more like icked out by like a fight scene than like that fight scene in The Killer. But yeah, same guy, same actor.
Same actor. So I don't know. Disgusting, but maybe it was also kind of hot.
I just had to mention that. So if any guys, if you're listening and I tell that story, Uruk-hai licking the blood off the sword, it's kind of hot. I said what I said. I also know I said that Rose the Hat is my problematic wife. So maybe something's wrong with me. But I've been hosting a horror movie podcast
what?
for years.
Right.
You know what? You gotta type.
Yeah. If you can't be open on your own podcast, where can you be open, right? That's
Exactly. You guys get me. I'll tell you what my favorite Lord of the Rings villain monster creature is, and it's because she scared me so much, still kind of does. I have to say is Shelob.
Oh
Mhm.
yeah. Yeah, see, you go for the
beastly creatures.
The beastly creatures. That's so interesting. I love that.
And I'm also like arachnophobic.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So Shelob really does scare me.
Yeah.
But I
Horrifying.
do love the Nazgûl, especially the Witch King, because the Witch King has the best helmet. I love Smaug, because Smaug's a dragon. I like the big elephants. There's something about big ass elephants that I will always love. And because like elephants are already big ass elephants. So to have bigger asser elephants.
Yeah. Because they're almost like they look more like elephants, but elephants, but like they're kind of like mammoths, like woolly mammoths.
Yeah.
Almost. They're
Huge.
just like when we think of just one of our animals, we think like, oh, in the Jurassic period, it was even bigger.
Yeah.
Whatever, like, oh, saber-toothed tiger or whatever. So you almost think that like they could have existed like that big back in prehistoric time.
And it's interesting because like Shelob's allowed to take the role of like the T-Rex from Jurassic Park, so to speak.
Mhm.
She is
Yep.
playing that beastly monster. But the big ass elephants, I know they have a real Lord of the Rings name. I don't know what it is.
They're called
I think they're called elephants.
Yeah, elephants, or also another word for them is the mama-kill.
The Mama Kill?
That's what I was saying. This
Yeah.
girl is an encyclopedia of Lord of the Rings knowledge. Yeah, you know the name of the elephants. That's
Yeah, but
nuts.
I mean, people just call them the Oliphants. Yeah, the
Oliphants?
Yeah.
All right.
Uh-huh.
So you could say I already said they're kaiju coded, but really they played the same role as like the Imperial AT-AT walkers from The Empire Strikes Back.
Ooh, yes, I mean,
yeah.
well, yeah, that's such a great, such a great
Comparison.
comparison, because yeah, I mean, you almost feel it in that scene, right? It's
Yeah.
like, I feel like it's kind of an homage to that scene, right? With their
Yeah.
kind of knocking the legs down so that all you have to do is
So-
get the legs and then they go down, you know?
And I love Gimli. That still only counts as one.
Yeah, right. Right. I think one of the great examples of kind of like a Steven Spielberg homage almost with Lord of the Rings. I think they were going or I guess that's George Lucas, but big
Yeah.
blockbuster.
Yeah, big
like,
blockbuster. Yeah.
homage. Yeah. It's like, okay, let's take down an Oliphant, just like
Like Night at Walker.
yeah.
And like I always watch Lord of the Rings on the small screen.
Mhm.
Growing
Yeah.
up, I only seen it on TV and Blu-ray. But when I saw, and I did not see Two Towers, I got sick that weekend, so I wasn't able to go see Two Towers.
Mm.
But I did see Fellowship and Return of the King in theaters, and seeing the big ass elephants on the
Yeah.
big screen was magic. I was like,
Yeah.
that's why this movie won 10 on. Not because of the big ass. Well, maybe because of the big ass
Well,
elephants.
maybe because of the big ass elephants. Yeah.
But just moments like that on the big screen are when King Theoden is
Yeah.
doing like his speech
Yes.
before, or when
Beautiful.
Aragorn did his speech
Yes.
before, or the
Yeah.
horror of Shelob,
Yeah.
which is scarier on the moment where Eowyn is like, I am no man, and stabs the Witch King in the face. Like, that's a big screen movie. You need a big ass screen for the big ass elephants.
Yeah, and the big ass spider.
Yup. Yep, you're right. That is one big ass spider. Guys, this conversation has been so good. It's been an epic one. It's a Lord of the Rings length, so I'm very proud of us.
We did it. Yeah, we did it proud. Yeah, this has been such a joy to talk through these different,
really,
many different faces of horror in this franchise, but just also in general, just the genre. Yeah, an absolute treat.
I'm going to let you guys kind of plug what you guys have going on, because I know it's a bunch and everyone, you're going to want to know what's happening. But I have one more question for you guys.
Oh, please.
And I'm going to let you tag team this answer. If you guys were being tracked down by the Nazgûl led by the Witch King, would you die?
That is such a great question. Me personally,
no.
You don't think so? You wouldn't die.
No. Mm-mm.
Why? Well, okay, why? We need a why there.
Because they're after the ring, and I wouldn't put it on.
Okay. So you wouldn't be tempted by.
That's very smart.
I will say that in the pursuit of the ring, they also destroy and kill.
Yeah, but I'm just like a little hobbit girl, and I mean the hobbits all survived, so
yeah.
No.
I think
I'm sneaky like that.
In my ego, I would try to challenge them, and I think I'd get stabbed by the blade.
Oh gosh.
And I'd become a little Frodo Baggins, haunted by like a shadow. I think I'd die, guys.
Okay, no.
I think I'd go down.
I would like to amend that answer. You would try it, but then I would save you.
Oh, okay. She'd save me.
Because you would be like the Frodo, and I would be like the Sam.
Sure.
And I would save him.
You'd save me. Yeah.
And then we would.
I love that.
And I'd be...
Yeah. What about you, Austin? Would you survive the Nazgûl, or how would that go?
Well, there's a reason I picked those guys, because you said those were your favorites. They were not my favorite.
So would you survive? Shelob then?
It is 100% a no. I'll tell you why. I'm not going to Mordor. It don't have anything I want over there. Let's just say Gandalf picked me for this trek for whatever reason, which is fair, because Frodo is like, why me? So like, it's fair. If I found myself in Shelob's lair, Shelob wouldn't have to do anything, because I would instantly die the moment I saw Shelob. I'd be like, my soul would just leave my body and just be like, nope, we're done here.
I'm done.
End of story. Sam, you've always been better than me. You gotta carry it the rest of the way. And I just nope out of there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not to mention getting out of that layer is like close to
Oh
impossible
gosh,
too,
yeah.
right?
How to get out of that layer?
Even if you were going to try to run away, no way, right? It's a maze.
It would
I give
be
up.
like, yeah. It would be like when you see Medusa and you turn to stone.
Oh yeah.
I would see the big ass spider and I would just dead, gone.
Instant
Bye-byes.
death.
Instant kill.
Exactly. And She'll be happy. She didn't have to do nothing. She might not even seen me.
And she'd be like, yes, lunch. I will eat him slowly forever.
Exactly. And I wouldn't know because I pieced out. So, but unfortunately, because Shelob scares me the most, she wasn't always my favorite because she's scary, but now that I appreciate horror so much, maybe because I made a spider movie, that could also be because
Yeah.
I'm still arachnophobic, but now I have like an appreciation for fictional big ass spiders.
Sure. Yep.
So I think that might be influencing my answer now. But yeah, guys, I love this. This was so much fun. What do you guys have coming up? I know Silvertongues is on the way.
Yeah, the next big thing is, of course, our next fiction podcast called Silvertongues. The best place to find a lot of this stuff is going to be acornartsandentertainment.com. That's sort of our landing page for a lot of these things. But Silvertongues is certainly that next podcast coming up. We're branding it as a tropical thriller, so there's going to be a lot of suspense. There's going to be some good action there. All of our podcasts are full cast and they are immersive, so we call it television for your ears. So they're fully soundscaped. You hear doors open, you hear cars crash, you hear it all. And so Silvertongues is going to be no different. It's going to have that full like big cinematic vibe. We even have an original composer as part of this production. So we're very excited for a lot of the pieces that are coming together for Silvertongues. So,
and if you haven't heard Call of the Void yet, that one of course is available as well. We've done that already. It's 3 seasons completed, but if you haven't heard it yet, you're always welcome to watch or to listen to that one as well.
Yeah, as well as our feature film House of Ka will be coming out soon. We don't have an official release date for that yet. We're working our way through distribution and navigating those waters. But again, the website Acorn Arts Entertainment.
I'll keep you updated.
A great place to see where that stuff is going to be coming out at. So the trailer for that is available now. Same with trailers for Silvertongues and Call of the Void, so you can get a flavor of the type of horror that we put out into the world pretty quickly.
Yeah, we're very interested. Our plan is to make a lot more of these audio drama podcasts. So, if you're interested in more of those or keeping in touch, checking us out, you always reach out to our social media, that website. We have a Patreon that if anyone wants to help support us and so that we can create more of these shows, that would be awesome.
That'd be awesome too. So yeah, more horror coming your way soon from Acorn Arts.
Yeah, because we try to avoid it, but somehow
it all comes back.
You just got to lean into it.
Yeah,
that's true.
So thank you guys so much for coming on this show. I'm going to place links in the show notes to those social medias and to the Acorn website. So you guys listening can follow, see what Michael and Josie are up to, and see all the upcoming Michigan produced horror coming this way.
Awesome. Thank you so much,
Thanks
Austin.
so much, Austin.
This was fantastic.
You're the best, man.
Yeah, this was so
great.
much fun.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Thank you, Michael and Josie, for joining me and for going on this quest to explore the horrors of Middle Earth with me. Michael and Josie truly are the best, so I encourage everyone listening to check out their horror work, especially the upcoming podcast, Silvertongues, which launches August 15th. Trust me, guys, you won't want to miss it. The Call of the Void is really good, so listen to that one too, guys. If you like this show or my other horror endeavors, then I recommend subscribing to my Patreon. I retooled it so it is only $3 a month, and you'll get exclusive content, movie reviews, as well as the extended version of this episode. It's Lord of the Rings, guys. I had to make an extended version. If you haven't already, subscribe to the Would You Die YouTube channel. There you can watch video versions of the podcast episodes, my short film Ice Cream, and more horror content to come. If you like this show, please let me know. Leave a review and rate on Spotify or Apple or wherever you listen to this show. Also, feel free to interact with me on social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, wherever you're most comfortable. It may not seem like a lot, but trust me, every single like, share, comment, follow, it all really helps this podcast to grow and helps me keep going. And feel free to let me know how I'm doing. What do you guys like about this show? Where are some areas I can improve? Guests you'd like me to have on? Monsters you want me to talk about? Let me know what you guys think. Do you like monsters, gore, and the behind-the-scenes looks at your favorite horror films? Then be sure to check out FANGORIA, one of the premier brands in horror. FANGORIA has been delivering quality magazines since 1979. Each collectible issue features exclusive articles about your favorite monsters as well as up-and-coming terrors. Be sure to check out the Fangoria store website for subscriptions and a bunch of cool merch. And while you're there, use promo code WoodYouDieShow for 20% off your entire order. That's right, 20% off your entire order. Applies to subscription and one-time orders. Applies to the first subscription order only. You can find Would You Die's social media on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Would You Die Show. Also, now you can follow me on TikTok at Would You Die Podcast. Would You Die is a partner with the Three Wise Men Media, a Metro Detroit-based group of awesome guys, Kyle, Tyler, and Dylan, where they bring you professional wrestling, indie comic books, and so much more. The music you hear in the beginning and end of each episode is composed by my friend Josie Palmer. Next week is another big episode, and it's a topic perfect for listening to on the 4th of July. Until next time, I'm Austin Torres. Try not to die.